So for my final project, I really wanted to focus on somebody who not necessarily has died, but has left a lasting impression on not just the Christian population in this country, but really the general population of a people in the world. And really no one better came to mind than Billy Graham. So I'm going to spend the next little bit talking about his life, his upbringing, his accomplishments, his family, and his last words that he would like to leave with us when it's his time to go. All right, so I'm sure we all know him as Billy Graham, but his real name is William Franklin Graham Jr. He was born November 7th in 1918 in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he was actually raised on a dairy farm. I don't know if you know this, but his home has actually been refurbished and restored and was picked up and moved and is now at the Billy Graham Library, which is also based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and his lovely wife is buried in the front yard amongst all these beautiful flowers. Fun fact, it's really cool. I live near there. I've never actually been, but I've heard a lot of really great things. So he grew up on a dairy farm, and he was not a stranger to hard work. The Big Ben clock woke the family up at 2:30 a.m. every morning. He was one of 4 children, and he was expected to milk at least 20 cows every morning and every afternoon. So hard work was something he grew up with and had a great appreciation for. He was baptized by sprinkling in 1918. He was actually a member of a Reformed Presbyterian church. He grew up in a very Christian household, so those values were not foreign to him. He grew up with them and had them instilled in him and his brothers and sisters. But the sprinkling thing is important because we're going to come back to that a little bit later. So like I said, he grew up in a Reformed Presbyterian church in a Christian household. But when he was about 16 years old, he went to, I don't want to say a crusade, but kind of like an evangelical event that was thrown by, or was delivered by Fowler Ham. And the whole premise of what he spoke about that night was the laziness of Christian morals, how they have just let them go, how they didn't stick to them anymore, and how they have just really become lax and their morals have kind of fallen to the side, and the Christians really didn't represent what Christians were supposed to. And I guess that really hit home with 16-year-old Billy Graham, and he decided he was ready to dedicate his life to Christ. So just because you're raised in a Christian home, doesn't really mean anything. It took him 16 years to give his life to Christ. Let's see. He went to Bob Jones College, which was had a heavy fundamentalist foundation. He lasted 3 or 4 months and left and went to what is now called Trinity College. It was there that Graham got the official call to become a preacher, and he would actually preach on street corners. And really just to anybody that would listen, he had that fire burning inside of him, and anywhere and everywhere he could, he'd get up and start talking. He was not scared of crowds. He was actually a great orator, which was, I don't know, really cool. That's something that I didn't know. I thought, I know pastors that still throw up before they go on stage because it's really intimidating to speak in front of hundreds of people, and Billy Graham did hundreds of thousands and millions of people, and it's just amazing everything that he did, but we'll touch on that later. So he got the call while he was at Trinity College to become a preacher, and while he was at Trinity, he became the head preacher at the United Gospel Church. So he was a college student and a preacher at a church, and he did a good job. It took him a while before he backed out of that, so he stayed grounded, and that's awesome. He later attended Wheaton, which is where he met his wife, Ruth. But Donna Weiland, who really just I don't know, she did a lot of research on Billy Graham, and I want to quote her. One Sunday after preaching in February 1939, Billy was ordained a Southern Baptist minister, offering himself as a military chaplain during World War II. He was declined and advised to return to Wheaton College to finish his degree, which he completed in 1943. Okay, so right then and there, he was ordained, and he wanted to be a military chaplain in World War II. I'm sorry, I just think that speaks volumes about his character and about his personality and about his true call to follow Jesus. I mean, you're going to give your life up and put yourself in a war zone to be a chaplain. I mean, that's just incredible. And I think that speaks a lot about Billy Graham. So like I said, he met his wife at Wheaton in 1943. He met his wife at Wheaton, and they were married in August of 1943, and they had their first child in 1945, which was really cute. He has a lot of kids. Who are actually very well-grounded children and have grown up to be well-grounded adults, which is really cool. Graham was heavily involved in YFC, which is better known as Youth for Christ, and it was there that he traveled all over the world, Canada and Europe, South Africa, Asia, I mean, you name it, he was there. And he spoke at rallies and conferences just to stir up Jesus in the youth of this nation. And it was through UFC, not university, YFC outreach programs that he met many of the individuals that would later help him grow his empire for Christ. So a lot of the people that he met while involved in YFC have actually re-entered the picture later on with the Billy Graham Association and all his endeavors that he has really just engulfed himself in his whole life. He just dedicated truly every part of his life to reaching the lost. And he's so selfless, and he followed the Lord's call and even still does. I mean, it's just incredible. And if you have time, I can't even cover everything that he has done in his whole life in 10 minutes. But it's mind-blowing and amazing that someone truly listened to his call. I mean, I'm sure that hundreds of people listen to the Lord's call every day, but to have a man who really put himself out there and has truly changed the world, it's just incredible. Okay, back onto this. So over the next 10 years, Graham would hold rallies and evangelical events all over the continental U.S., like I mentioned earlier, in Africa, South America, Europe, and Asia. And it was with this notoriety that became that came extreme criticism. People didn't really think that he was reaching out for Jesus. They thought he was what do they call it? That he wasn't there to glorify God. He was there to glorify himself. And there's a word that they used over and over and over. He was a self-enriching evangelist, which is just, it's terrible to say. But if that's the criticism you're going to get, so be it. His career continued to grow, and so did his crusades. And even though he tried his best to stay away from anything and everything politically based, he found himself being called upon by presidential candidates, by the presidents themselves, anybody in office, because they wanted to seek his opinions and his advice on almost anything and everything. And I don't know, I think that says so much about his character. He is a man who followed the call of Jesus, and Democrats and Republicans alike seeked his advice. Truly incredible. Oh, but one thing I forgot to cover. Sorry. Pause. Rewind. He, when he was at, let me refer back to my notes here so I don't say this incorrectly. He was actually baptized when he became a Southern Baptist minister. This is where his roots began. Remember when I said that he wanted to be a military chaplain for World War II? What I neglected to say, and I'm so sorry, is that he was actually baptized, dunked in the water. And that is when, in 1943, that is when his foundation and roots, I guess, settled in the Southern Baptist community, and that's when it all started, and that was in the 50s, and it's now 2015, and he's still got them heavy roots in Southern Baptism, Southern Baptist roots, which is really cool. So again, I'm going to quote Donna Weiland because I think she's just incredible. The largest crusade audience in the history of Billy's ministry assembled at, I can't guess, a plaza in Seoul, Korea in 1973. Even Billy was amazed as more than 1 million people gathered to hear his famous evangelistic messages. Since 1977, he has preached in virtually every country of the former Eastern Bloc, including the former Soviet Union. I mean, can we just say, wow, that is a country that is so dark, and it's just really untouched by Jesus. And to hear that many people gathered to hear the message is just, it's really inspiring, and that it really just shows that when you follow the Lord's call, the Lord will bring them to you. I mean, look at what a dark place he was in and how many showed up to hear the message. I mean, that's just incredible. Okay, so some things you may not know about Billy Graham is the Billy Graham Association. It is huge, and it was founded in the 1950s. They actually own a media production company that has produced over 200 films. I actually didn't know that until I was working on this project. I think that's pretty incredible. In 1953, Graham wrote and published his first book called Peace with God. He's written so many books. Go in Lifeway. I mean, you don't even have to go to Lifeway. Go to Barnes & Noble and just peruse around. He did so much, and just, he's got a gift. I mean, the man speaks, he writes books, he produces movies. He's just awesome. I just think so highly of him. Okay, sorry, back on topic. So again, I am, let's see. Okay, I'm going to quote Donna again. Crusades beginning in 1947, they all started. That's when his crusades went, 1947, in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And they do not end until 1996. Okay, so 1947, 1996. Billy Graham crusades were through that whole time. I mean, can you imagine how many people he touched? Oh, that's just amazing to me. He reached more than 215 million people, and even more millions through his radio shows, his televisions, and his films and his webcasts. 215 million people have heard the message because of Billy Graham, have heard the love of Jesus Christ because of Billy Graham. It's just amazing. Billy Graham has created quite an empire for not just himself, but for Jesus. He's reached millions of people and has made his life's mission of bringing the lost to Christ. He actually has a library based in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is what I talked to you about earlier. It provides holiday functions. They do these precious carriage rides and a live nativity scene. And they have breakfast and lunch and dinner served for everybody. It's really just a beautiful place. People actually neglect their own holiday events and go to the Billy Graham Library to do their events. They hold fundraisers and just a lot of activities and things for kids and adults throughout the year, not just on Christmas and Easter and the holidays. They also operate a crisis hotline. I know this because one of my friends, who is now a licensed counselor, worked for his crisis hotline. And I mean, the man truly has made so many opportunities available for not only the lost to come to know the Lord, but for so many people to get their foot in the door and be the vessel for Jesus. And I just think that speaks volumes, that he created such an empire for Jesus. Okay, so the final thoughts from Billy Graham. He was asked if there was, what would he like to say? And he was quoted as saying, "I would speak less and study more and I would spend more time with my family. I would also spend more time in spiritual nurture, seeking to grow closer to God so I could become more like Christ. About one thing, I have absolutely no regrets, however, and that is my commitment many years ago to accept God's calling to serve Him as an evangelist of the gospel of Christ. What a great man. He had such an incredible work ethic. He grew up in a Christian household, left his religious denomination that he grew up in, changed to Southern Baptist, became an ordained minister, was preaching on street corners, went to a Bible college, met his wife, had beautiful kids, established this empire for Jesus, and reached 215 million people. And the man is still alive. No, he's not. Oh my gosh.